All right, let's get some reaction now from our colleague, SABC correspondent Trent Murray, who's standing by for us in Brussels. A very good afternoon to you, Trent. Of course, the Europeans, like everybody else, will have been eagerly watching what's been happening in the United States. What's been the reaction thus far?
Yeah, well, it's the morning after the night before here in Europe, and I think much like in South Africa, people here are waking up to the news that indeed President Trump is back. We are seeing some political reaction, as you might imagine. Several European leaders quite quick out of the gates with congratulatory messages. Leaders like French President Emmanuel Macron, who said he looks forward to working with President Trump like he did 4 years ago. We also have heard from UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, who said he's looking forward to working with the new Trump administration to cement that special relationship between the UK and the US. And then several other leaders across Europe also offering their messages. But I think right now this is a bit of a wake-up call for Europe. They certainly have been paying attention to some of the rhetoric on the campaign trail from President Trump, including accusations that Europe is freeloading in organisations like NATO, not paying its fair share to defence and relying too heavily on the US, and has also chided against the European Union for some of its export and economic policies, and has suggested tariffs could be on the way. We know German Chancellor Olaf Scholz and French President Emmanuel Macron have spoken on the telephone in the last hour or so to discuss what all of this means for Europe. But I think right now there'll be many nervous leaders here wondering what this very unorthodox and very unpredictable politician could have in store for the US-European relationship.
Yeah, Trent, you said it right. It's already been said that he is a highly unpredictable person. When it comes to the issue of the Russia-Ukraine war, no doubt a lot of European leaders will be quite concerned, given Trump's views on NATO and, you know, him wanting to withdraw from it at some point. What's the feeling around what he may do next? And do you think they'll try to be proactive in engaging with him around how they deal with the Russia-Ukraine situation?
Look, I think undoubtedly, and I know that certainly in Europe and especially here in Brussels with a lot of diplomats, this was always a concern that if President Trump was to be victorious, then it could signal Washington looking to withdraw from that conflict, and in particular its support from Ukraine. I mean, the US is by far and away the biggest backer of Ukraine, both militarily and financially. And really, if Washington was to step back and try and leave it to Europe to fill the gap, I think it would be very, very difficult for them to do that, even just from a financial perspective and also just from a defence perspective. They don't have the same industrial muscle, I suppose you could say, when it comes to weaponry and the like. So look, I think over the next sort of weeks and months, it'll be very interesting to see what happens on the Ukraine front. We've heard from the Trump campaign that they are looking to try and settle that conflict soon. What does that mean? Does that mean he will try and force President Putin and Zelensky to the negotiating table? Will Ukraine have to make concessions over some of its territory, which is currently being held by Russia? Again, we just don't know. But I think certainly from a NATO perspective, it will be a very challenging few months ahead, I think, as they try to chart just what the US policy will be when it comes to European defence.
Yeah, and lastly, Trent, what are ordinary Europeans saying about, the Trump victory? What's being said on things like social media? Because, of course, the political approach is not always the same as ordinary folks' approach. Yeah,
absolutely. We've actually just been watching some of the videos which are coming in of what's known as vox pops, as we say, when journalists go out on the street across Europe and ask people what they think as they head to work or to school, and many of them are quite surprised. I just was watching a woman in Paris who was saying it feels like having a bad hangover, was her perspective, that this is all coming back again, all of the tensions and the chaos that Europe saw during the 4 years of the Trump administration. Look, I think for many Europeans, the truth is he was not their candidate of choice. The polling here in many European countries asked voters if they did have a say in the US election, who would they vote for? And in pretty well all of those polls across Europe, they said that their choice would have been Kamala Harris. Donald Trump is, as I say, an unusual politician, not necessarily one to European tastes or palate, politically, I suppose you could say. But, this is the reality that we're waking up with this morning, and Europe will just have to find a way to work with former President Trump, who is now, of course, President-elect Trump.
Indeed, indeed. Trent, thank you so much for your time and speaking to us. That was Trent Murray, our SABC correspondent in Brussels.